Hello and welcome to this exploring session, and today we are looking at the Triumphs of Truth by Thomas Middleton, a Lord Mayor show from 1613. We are going back to October the 29th, and when this particular pageant was performed. It is a long text, much longer than some of the other pageants where we've been able to fit 2 or even sometimes 3 pageants into a session. Here we are enforced to travel through this at a reasonable lick, but it is also in many ways one of the much more comprehensive and comprehensible texts, he said, hopefully, fingers crossed, than some of the ones we've done before. If you're interested in earlier expositions of the Lord Mayor's show, we have done readings of all of the texts extant and, for that matter, fragmentary up to 1612, which we did actually chronologically quite a long time ago, but we have them in a playlist that is available if you want to work through in that way or dance around. But today, for Triumphs of Truth, I have assembled this wonderful team of people who are going to have a read of the text as we go. So just going around the room, briefly introduce yourselves. Liza, introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Liza Graham, actor, singer, and Renaissance text coach, 2 actors in London, looking forward to getting to grips with this text.
And Eric, introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Eric, and I moved from a tunnel to a cave. It's much more comfortable now.
This is a long-term reference to the light levels around which Eric is surrounded or not surrounded, depending on the time of day. Rachael, introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Rachael, an actor.
And Greg, do introduce yourself.
I'm Greg. I'm not a professional actor, but I do love a good Lord's Mayor show.
And Angela, do introduce yourself.
Hello, yours truly, historian from London and Warwick at the same time.
Sort of Schrodinger's academic. And Tracey, to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Tracey, and I may or may not be accompanied by at least 1 cat, possibly 2 cats at some stage during the evening. And I'm really looking forward to hearing this one out loud and seeing what you make of it.
And I'm your host, Robert Crighton. Occasionally my screen will flash up a tube map style interpretation of the procession route for the Lord's Mayor's show. We will vaguely talk that through as we go. Broadly speaking, it all kicks off at the Guildhall. They process down to the river, travel along the river to Westminster, come back light, head up to St Paul's, and then work their way along Cheapside back to the Guildhall again. But we will hopefully find that this text will present us with some of those things as we go along, and I say there will be a visual reference point coming up. We have looked at this many times in the past, so I don't want to linger too much on that with a text that is so long. So I'm just going to ask Liza if you could kick us off by just reading the sort of title page bump that exists on the Triumphs of Truth, please.
The Triumphs of Truth, a solemnity unparalleled for cost, art, and magnificence. At the confirmation and establishment of that worthy and true nobly minded gentleman, Sir Thomas Middleton, Knight, in the honourable office of His Majesty's Lieutenant, the Lord Mayor of the thrice famous city of London. Beginning at his lordship's going, and proceeding after his return from receiving the oath of mayoralty at Westminster, on the morrow next after Simon and Jude's Day, October 29th, 1613. All the shows, pageants, chariots, morning, noon, and night triumphs, directed, written, and redeemed into form from the ignorance of some former times and their common writer, by Thomas Middleton.
And I think I'm just going to pause us there. Yes, we have a new Lord Mayor coming in, and that is Sir Thomas Middleton, Knight, not to be confused with the writer of this pageant, who is Thomas Middleton. Tracey, is there anything you can tell us about the incoming Lord Mayor?
Yes, he's an interesting one, actually, unlike last week's. he was from a very wealthy and quite powerful Welsh family. And his brother was Hugh Middleton, who's mentioned on the title page of this edition of the text as being the man who largely founded and directed the development of the new river, which is bringing fresh water down through Islington to the city. The Middletons owned Chirk Castle, I think, in Wales. So they were contenders, and they were very well connected with other city families.
Excellent. We have essentially some additional title page material. Liza, if you could continue with this.
Showing also his lordship's entertainment upon Michaelmas Day last, being the day of his election at that most famous and admired work of the running stream from Amwell Head into the cistern at Islington, being the sole cost, industry, and invention of the worthy Mr. Hugh Middleton of London, goldsmith. London, printed by Nicholas Oakes, 1613.
So just a hope we will get to that additional entertainment upon Michaelmas Day last. We may not this session, we got a lot of text to come through, otherwise we'll look at it in a separate session further down the line. Greg, I'm going to ask you if you can read the dedicatory epistle or the epistle dedicatory, depending on your point of view.
To the great expectation of virtue and goodness, and most worthy of all those costs and honours, which the noble fellowship and society of grocers, and general love of the whole city, in full heaped bounties bestow upon him, the truly generous and judicious Sir Thomas Middleton, Knight, Lord Mayor of the Honourable City of London. As often as we shall fix our thoughts upon the Almighty Providence, so often they return to our capacities, laden with admiration, either from the divine works of his mercy, or those incomprehensible of his justice. But here to instance only his omnipotent mercy, it being the health and preservation of all his works, and first not only in raising, but also in preserving your London from many great and incident dangers, especially in foreign countries in the time of your youth and travels. And now, with safety, love, and triumph to establish you in this year's honour, crowning the perfection of your days and the gravity of your life with power, respect, and reverence. Next, in that myself, though unworthy, being of one name with your lordship, notwithstanding all oppositions and malice, ignorance, and envy, should thus happily live protected by part of that mercy, as if one fate did prosperously cleave to one name. Now to do service to your fame and worthiness and my pen, only to be employed in these bounteous and honourable triumphs, being but shadows to those eternal glories that stand ready for deservers, to which I commend the deserts of your justice, remaining ever to your lordship, in the best of my observance, Thomas Middleton.
So that's very much part of the course is make sure that you are nice to your patron. Not everybody does that, but Middleton does definitely play the game. So yeah, these are opening throat clearings from this particular document. I do love the way that this particular text does try to sell itself the excitement of things. It's got all the shows, pageants, chariots, morning, noon, and night triumphs. It's got all the things. I love it when a text really tries to sell itself. Any thoughts out of this opening bit of throat clearing? We haven't actually got to the actual meat of the entertainment, as it were. Silence from the room, but Eliza yes.
Me and Rachael, I think, both.
Well, might be a cat, I can't tell.
A very good cat, as all must acknowledge. I mean, there's a style for these dedicatory epistles that's a little bit more flowery, I think, than perhaps someone's normal prose might be. Middleton, as a dramatist, as I remember, writes a lot of prose that's a lot more clear than this. But if you're writing a dedicatory epistle, you have to show how clever you are, how witty you are, and also how very, very much you admire the person you're writing the dedicatory epistle to. especially if they commissioned you to write this play in the first place. So this does do that, maybe even a bit more eloquently than some other dedicatory epistles I've read.
Was that a genuine wave from Rachael, or was it just a lovely cat's tail?
Yes, no, it was a genuine wave. I was just gonna say that it sounds humorous already because he's kissing up to himself. I just thought it was funny.
Yes, I suppose yes. Writing a dedicatory epistle to someone who has the same name as you does have a certain interesting aesthetic quality.
Yes, and I do like the both the shade he throws at Munday earlier, and also the what is it? The malice, ignorance, and envy that he cites from people who presumably don't like that he's being protected by the Lord Mayor, who I think is his distant relation. Yes. So having cited the malice, ignorance, and envy, he's made sure that his haters are as immortalized as he is.
It does have a sort of quality of almost like it's the opening credits to a film here. Directed, written, and redeemed into form, etc., by Thomas Middleton, has a certain slight excessiveness to it, which I really love.
That might be something to do with the fact that it wasn't actually just Middleton who wrote it. It was actually Munday. In fact, if anything, got much more money than Middleton did for this particular year's show. So he's kind of eclipsed in this text, which is interesting. But yeah, no, he was the malice, ignorance, and envy bit. I've never been able to work out what that refers to. There's nothing in the Grocers' Company records about that, but you wouldn't expect it to be necessarily. It's just a bit enigmatic. But when he goes later on, he talks about his predecessor. I'm pretty sure it's not Munday. Actually, he's having a go at. It's actually Decker.
Because remember, the last session we did was actually 2 years ago in terms of chronology. Our look at 1612 was many months in the past, which was Decker, I think, off the top of my head. It wasn't it? Guess I am not making these things up. Yes, so we have. I'm glad you brought that up because yes, it's not actually in evidence in any of the text in front of us. But yes, our favourite Munday is in here as well. So if anyone's going to be berating anyone for the ignorance of former times, it's going to be more likely to be Munday than Middleton, I would have thought, because that's more Monday's stick. Anyway, we do need to move into the body of the text and move forward, and so there's still a bit more throat clearing to go before it starts getting really detaily, but it's very much heading there now. So Angela, I'm going to ask you to read the first big block of text in the Triumphs of Truth.
Search all chronicles, histories, records, in what language or letter soever. Let the inquisitive man waste the dear treasures of his time and eyesight. He shall conclude his life only in this certainty, that there is no subject upon earth received into the place of his government with the like state and magnificence as is the Lord of the City of London. This being then infallible, like the mistress of our triumphs, and not to be denied of any, how careful ought those gentlemen to be, to whose discretion and judgment the weight and charge of such a business is entirely referred and committed by the whole society, to have all things correspondent to that generous and noble freeness of cost and liberality, the streams of art to equal those of bounty, a knowledge that may take the true height of such an honourable solemnity, the miserable want of both, which in the impudent common writer hath often forced from me much pity and sorrow, and it would heartily grieve any understanding spirit to behold many times so glorious a fire in bounty and goodness, offering to match itself with freezing art, sitting in the darkness with the candle out, looking like the picture of Black Monday.
Yes, nothing so magnificent like the Lord Mayor of the City of London, as written by two Londoners, I think, off the top of my head. Rachael, if you continue this large block of text, but to speak the truth, please.
But to speak truth, which many beside myself can affirm upon knowledge, a care that hath been seldom equalled, and not easily imitated, hath been faithfully shown in the whole course of this business, both by the wardens and committees, men of much understanding, industry, and carefulness, little weighing the greatness of expense, so the cost might purchase perfection. So fervent hath been their desire to excel in that, which is a learned and virtuous ambition, and so unfeignedly pure the loves and affections of the whole company to his lordship. If any shall imagine that I set fairer colours upon their deserts, then they upon themselves, let them but read and conceive, and their own understandings will light them to the acknowledgement of their errors.
And Eric, next couple of paragraphs, please.
First they may here behold love and bounty opening with the morning, earlier than some of former years, ready at the first appearing of his lordship, to give his ear a taste of the day's succeeding glory, and thus the form of it presents itself. At Soper Lane End, a Senate house erected, upon which musicians sit playing, and more to quicken time, a sweet voice married to these words.
So we have a song. We actually not only have the lyrics to the song, we actually have the music. We're not going to be attempting to present the singing of this today, but this is something we will hopefully be able to follow up in future sessions, because we always like it when there is some genuine music. Liza, if I could ask you to read the song, just the lyrics as printed.
Mother of many honourable sons, think not the glass too slowly runs that in time's hand is set, because thy worthy son appears not yet. Lady, be pleased, the hour grows on, thy joy will be complete anon. Thou shalt behold the man enrolled in honour's books, whom virtue raises. Love circled round, his triumphs crowned with all good wishes, prayers, and praises. What greater comfort to a mother's heart than to behold her son's desert? Go hand in hand with love. Respect and honour, blessings from above. It is of power all griefs to kill, and with a flood of joy to fill thy aged eyes, to see him rise, with glory decked, where expectation, grace, truth, and fame, met in his name, attends his honour's confirmation.
And thus ends that particular song. Yes, we've got this sort of interesting early in the morning at Soper Lane End, a Senate house erected with music playing. I'm just where approximately that's just near the Guildhall near the Great Conduit, I think, isn't it, Tracey? Tell me if I'm horribly wrong there.
Yeah, it will be opposite the end of Lawrence Lane, because that's the way they would come out from the Guildhall. So it's on Cheapside, yeah.
So this is very much at the beginning of the event. Everyone's preparing to march out from Guildhall, and the text continues that. And I'll ask Tracey if you could read the next bit of description.
After this sweet air hath liberally spent itself, at the first appearing of the Lord Mayor from Guildhall in the morning, a trumpet placed upon that scaffold sounds forth his welcome. Then after a strain or two of music, a grave feminine shape presents itself from behind a silk curtain representing London, attired like a reverend mother, a long white hair naturally flowing on either side of her. On her head, a model of steeples and turrets, a habit crimson silk, nears the honourable garment of the city. her left hand holding a key of gold, who after a comely grace, equally mixed with comfort and reverence, sends from her lips this motherly salutation.
And I'll ask Angela, could you read The Speech of London?
Honour and joy salute thee. I am raised in comfort and in love to see thee glad and happy in thy blessings, nor esteem my words the less, 'cause I, a woman, speak. A woman's counsel is not always weak. I am thy mother, and at that name I know thy heart does reverence to me, as becomes a son of honour, in whose soul burns clear the sacred lights of divine fear and knowledge. I know that at this instant all the works of motherly love in me, shown to thy youth when it was soft and helpless, are summed up in thy most grateful mind. Thou well rememberest all my dear pains and care, with what affection I cherish thee in my bosom, watchful still over thy ways. Set wholesome and religious laws before the footsteps of thy youth, showed thee the way that led thee to the glory of this day, to which, with tears of the most fruitful joy that ever mother shed, I welcome thee. Oh, I could be content to take my part out of felicity only in weeping. Thy presence and this day is so dear to me. Look on my age, my honourable son, and then begin to think upon thy office. See how on each side of me hang the cares which I bestowed on thee in silver hairs. And now the faith, the love, the zealous fires with which I cheered thy youth, my age requires the duty of a mother I have shown through all the rites of pure affection, in care, in government, in wealth, in honour, brought thee to what thou art. Thou'st all from me, then what thou shouldst be, I expect from thee. Now to thy charge, thy government, thy cares, thy mother in her age submits her years. And though to my abundant grief I speak it, which now overflows my joy, some sons I have, thankless, unkind, and disobedient, rewarding all my bounties with neglect and will of purpose, willfully retire themselves from doing grace and service to me, when they have got all they can or hope for from me. The thankfulness in which thy life doth move did ever promise fairer fruits of love, and now they show themselves. Yet have they all my blessing with them, so the world shall see 'tis their unkindness, no defect in me. But go thou forward, my thrice honoured son, in ways of goodness. Glory is best won when merit brings it home. Disdain all titles purchased with coin. Of honour take thou hold. By thy desert let others buy it with gold. Fix thy most serious thought upon the weight thou goest to undergo. 'Tis the just government of this famed city, me, whom nations call their brightest eye. Then with what care and fear ought I to be o'erseen, to be kept clear? Spots in deformed faces are scarce noted, fair cheeks are strained, if ne'er so little blotted. Seest thou this key of gold? It shows thy charge. This place is the king's chamber. All pollution, sin, and uncleanness must be locked out here and be kept sweet with sanctity, faith, and fear. I see grace takes effect, heaven's joy upon her. 'Tis rare when virtue opes the gate to honour. My blessing be upon thee, son and lord, and on my sons all that obey my word.
Then, making her honour as before, the waits of the city there in service, his lordship and the worthy company are led forward towards the waterside, where you shall find the river decked in the richest glory to receive him, upon whose crystal bosom stand 5 islands, artfully garnished with all manner of Indian fruit trees, drugs, spiceries, and the like, the middle island with a fair castle especially beautified.
And there we'll pause, as that's effectively our first unit of action. The Lord Mayor barely made it out of the Guildhall when a trumpet plays and a grave feminine shape appears and does this speech. And then the waits, the musicians of the city, head down to the waterside where there is more things to look at. The 5 islands, etc. And then we have something of a gap before they return. They're going to head down the river to Westminster. Thoughts about this speech? About the speech of London. London literally blessing the incoming Lord Mayor. Thoughts on the room? Liza.
Well, a grave feminine shape. I wonder if that indicates an adult actor rather than a boy. And I also wonder if it might be someone whose work the incoming Lord Mayor knew, like a big name, because it seems awfully impertinent for a boy actor to be standing in front of the Lord Mayor delivering this long speech, calling himself his mother. And calling him thou. So I wonder if this is going to be, I don't know, possibly a person the Lord Mayor had a choice in casting, or that Middleton knew the mayor liked.
Yes, we have found with some of the other texts so far that there seems to be at least some preference for the bigger speeches to be done by adult players or older players. Certainly some shade was flown last session. Angela, I saw a hand.
I just wondered if London is always an older lady. So, and how the balance is done between, something that is beautiful but still is older.
The only other instance of London being personated I can think of is 3 Lords and 3 Ladies of London, and it's not very explicit about her age, but nowhere near as explicit as this one is in terms of costume or anything like that. So my hunch is yes, probably. I'm not altogether sure. The bit I really like about that is where he basically he has the actor saying basically, this is you're going to be a really, really good Lord Mayor, but there are some bastards here, and they're right here, just like wow, Middleton, It actually says they're here. That's really funny.
They're all after you. You're surrounded by people who want your job.
Unbelievable.
Eric.
I was going to say that it's interesting that it's the speech of London sort of welcoming him to the fold, I guess, because Tracey mentioned earlier that they had like property in Wales and stuff. So like maybe this is sort of an explicit way of saying, you might not be like a Londoner, but you're definitely a Londoner, if that makes sense.
That's a really interesting idea. I never thought about that before, actually. But yeah, you could be onto something there, actually.
And also the bit about, well, since we were talking about whether it's an older actor and stuff, just the description on her head, a model of steeples and turrets. I mean, that must be really heavy. that like just to carry around. It's just really, really, like, it must be really imposing and someone who's not going to move, sort of like dressing someone as a Statue of Liberty.
Well, you'll remember Jan von Wedel described a pageant device very similar to that in 1585.
Yeah, they may simply have made it out of paper or cardboard. It calls to mind today's elaborate headdresses worn by, say, drag queens, who are experts in this art as in much else.
Okay, any additional thoughts before we head back from Westminster? So, no particular mention of so much of what's potentially going on the water as they go and as they head back. Presumably not his department, so he doesn't really care. So we will go to the return. Who haven't I? Rachael, next paragraph, please.
but making haste to return to the city again, where triumph waits in more splendor and magnificence. The first then that attends to receive his lordship off the water at Barnard's castle is Truth's angel on horseback, his raiment of white silk powdered with stars of gold, on his head a crown of gold, a trumpeter before him on horseback, and Zeal the champion of truth, in a garment of flame-colored silk, with the bright hair on his head, from which shoot fire beams, following close after him, mounted alike, his right hand holding a flaming scourge, intimating thereby that as he is the manifester of truth, he is likewise the chastiser of ignorance and error.
The Salutation of the Angel. I have within mine eye my blessed charge. Hail, friend of truth, safety and joy attends thee. I am truth's angel, by my mistress sent to guard and guide thee. When thou took'st thy oath, I stood on thy right hand, though to thine eye in visible form I did not then appear. Ask but thy soul, 'twill tell thee I stood near. And 'twas a time to take care of thee then, at such a marriage before heaven and men, thy faith being wed to honor. Close behind thee stood error's minister that still sought to blind thee, and wrap his subtle mists about thy oath, to hide it from the nakedness of truth, which is truth's purest glory. But my light, still as it shone, expelled her blackest spite. His mists fled by, yet all I could devise could hardly keep them from some people's eyes, but thine they flew from. Thy cares but begun, wake on, the victory is not half yet won. Thou wilt still be assaulted, thou shalt meet with many dangers that in joy seem sweet, and ways most pleasant to a worldling's eye. My mistress has but one, and that leads high. To yond triumphant city follow me. Keep thou to truth, eternity keeps to thee.
On, boldly man of honor, thou shalt win. I am truth's champion, Zeal, the scourge of sin.
The trumpet then sounding, the angel and Zeal rank themselves just before his lordship and conduct him to Paul's chain. So just briefly to talk about geography here, on the map we've got here, so the landing point is not exactly as marked there because they're getting off at Barnard's Castle. But Paul's chain and just that general area, Tracey, do you want to just briefly talk about the geography of where they are and where they're heading? Because they're generally heading towards St. Paul's, but St. Paul's is a slightly different thing to what it is today.
Yes, indeed. It's Paul's chain is basically the boundary of the precinct to St. Paul's. So they're coming up from Barnard's Castle on the riverbank and then heading up straight up a street which is now a kind of a cul-de-sac actually, but it runs parallel to the road to the Wobbly Bridge coming straight down to the cathedral, and it crosses Carter Lane. So it's kind of that they're on the very edge of the cathedral precinct.
And so, yes, we've got Truth's Angel on horseback. We've got some really lovely details, trumpets and beautiful costumes. We've got an angel. We've got Zeal. We've got the sense of there isn't a moment wasted so far in terms of the journeying and that we've seen, assuming fantastic barge stuff occurring while they're on the water as well. Any additional quick thoughts before we read on, Eric?
Are there two horses or is it just one horse? Because it says the Truth's Angel on horseback and then a trumpeter before him on horseback. Is that just like... Yeah, that's a lot of horses.
Yeah, I think that seems reasonable. The you want to keep... you don't want to be walking around if you're trumpeting. You'll get tired. You've got to keep your breath going. I'm being silly now. I have no idea. It does seem to indicate that the trumpeter is also on horseback, but it might not be. It might just be the way the syntax works. Zeal in a garment of flame. Always nice to see a garment of flame. Okay, Greg, if I could ask you to read on, go from the trumpet then sounding. So we've had a speech from the angel, a couple of lines from Zeal. Trumpet sounds.
The trumpet then sounding, the angel and Zeal rank themselves just before his lordship and conduct him to Paul's Chain, where, in the south yard, Error, in a chariot with his infernal ministers, attends to assault him, his garments of ash-colour silk, his head rolled in a cloud over which stands an owl, a mole on one shoulder, a bat on the other, all symbols of blind ignorance and darkness, mists hanging at his eyes. Close before him rides Envy, his champion, eating of a human heart, mounted on a rhinoceros, attired in red silk, suitable to the bloodiness of her manners, her left pap bare where a snake fastens, her arms half naked, holding in her right hand a dart tincted in blood.
Eric, if I could ask you... Angela, sorry. Could I ask you to read the greeting of Error, please?
Art come? Oh, welcome, my triumphant lord, my glory's sweetheart. How many millions of happy wishes hath my love told out for this desired minute? I was dead till I enjoyed thy presence. I saw nothing, a blindness thicker than idolatry, clove to my eyeballs. Now I am all of light, of fire, of joy. Pleasure runs nimbly through me. Let's join together, both in state and triumph, and down with beggarly and friendless virtue that hath so long impoverished this fair city. My beast shall trample on her naked breast, under my chariot wheels her bones lie pressed. She ne'er shall rise again, great power this day is given unto thy hand. Make use on it, Lord, and let thy will and appetite sway the sword. Down with them all now, whom thy heart envies. Let not thy conscience come into thine eyes this 12-month. If thou lovest revenge or gain, I'll teach thee to cast mists, to blind the plain and simple eye of man. He shall not note, nor see thy wrath when 'tis upon his throat. All shall be carried with such art and wit that what thy lust acts shall be counted fit. Then for attendants that may best observe thee, I'll pick out servants of my band to serve thee. Here's Gluttony and Sloth, two precious slaves, will tell thee more than a whole herd of knaves, the worth of every office to a hair, and who bids most, and how the markets are. Let them alone to smell, and for a need they'll bring thee in bribes for measure and light bread. Keep thy eye winking and thy hand wide ope, then thou shalt know what wealth is, and the scope of rich authority, how 'tis sweet and dear. Make use of time then, thou'st but one poor year, and that will quickly slide. Then be not nice. Both power and profit cleaves to my advice. And what's he locks his ear from those sweet charms, or runs not to meet gain with wide-stretched arms? There is a poor, thin, threadbare thing called truth. I give the warning of her. If she speak, stop both thine ears close. Most professions break that ever dealt with her, an unlucky thing. She's almost sworn to nothing. I can bring 1,000 of our parish, besides queens, that ne'er knew what truth meant nor ever means. Some I could cull out here, even in this throng, who, if I would show my children, and how strong I were in faction. Lass, poor simple stray, she's all her lifetime finding out one way. She's but one foolish way. Straight on, right forward, and yet she makes a toll on it, and goes on with care and fear, forsooth, when I can run over 100 with delight and pleasure, backways and byways, and fetch in my treasure after the wishes of my heart, by shifts, deceits, and sleights. And I'll give thee those gifts. I'll show thee all my corners yet untold, the very nooks where bedlams hide their gold, in hollow walls and chimneys, where the sun never yet shone, nor truth came never near. This of thy life I'll make the golden year. Follow me then.
And
Sorry, I missed the message. Learn now to
And I did too.
Learn now to scorn thy inferiors, those most love thee and wish to eat their hearts that sit above thee.
Zeal, stirred up with divine indignation at the impudence of these hellhounds, both forceth their retirement, and makes way for the chariot where in truth his mistress sits, in a close garment of white satin, which makes her appear thin and naked, figuring thereby her simplicity and nearness of heart to those that embrace her. A robe of white silk cast over it, filled with the eyes of eagles, showing her deep insight and height of wisdom. Over her thrice sanctified head a milk-white dove, and on each shoulder one the sacred emblems of purity, meekness, and innocency. Under her feet serpents, in that she treads down all subtlety and fraud, her forehead impaled with a diadem of stars, the witness of her eternal descent. On her breast a pure round crystal, showing the brightness of her thoughts and actions. A sun in her right hand, than which nothing is truer. A fan filled with all stars in her left, with which she parts darkness and strikes away the vapors of ignorance. If you hearken to Zeal, her champion, after his holy anger is past against Error and his crew, he will give it you in better terms, or at least more smoothly and pleasingly.
Old furies back, or with this scourge of fire whence sparkles out religious chaste desire, I'll whip you down to darkness. This is a place worthy my mistress. Her eternal grace be the full object to feast all these eyes, but thine the first. He that feeds here is wise. Nor by the naked plainness of her weeds judged thou her worth. No burnished gloss truth needs. That crown of stars shows her descent from heaven. That robe of white filled all with eagle's eyes. Her piercing sight through hidden mysteries. Those milk-white doves, her spotless innocence. Those serpents at her feet, her victory shows over deceit and guile, her rankest foes. And by that crystal mirror at her breast, the clearness of her conscience is expressed. And showing that her deeds all darkness shun, her right hand holds truth's symbol, the bright sun, a fan of stars she in the other twists, with which she chaseth away error's mists. And now she makes to thee so even grace, for to her rich and poor look for to her rich and poor look upon with one face.
And I'll just ask Rachael to read the words of truth.
Man raised by faith and love, upon whose head honor sits fresh, let not thy heart be led in ignorant ways of insolence and pride, from her that to this day hath been thy guide. I never showed thee yet more paths than one, and thou hast found sufficient that alone to bring thee hither. Then go forward still, and having most power, first subject thy will. Give the first fruits of justice to thyself, then dost thou wisely govern, though that else of sin and darkness still opposing thee, counsels thy appetite to master thee. But call to mind what brought thee to this day. Was falsehood, cruelty, or revenge the way? Thy lust or pleasures, people's curse or hate? These were no ways could raise thee to this state. The ignorant must acknowledge, if then from me, which no ill dare deny or sin control, forsake me not, that can advance thy soul. I see a blessed yielding in thy eye. Thou'rt mine, lead on, thy name shall never die.
These words ended, they all set forward, the chariot of truth and her celestial handmaids, the graces and virtues, taking place next before his lordship, zeal and the angel before that, the chariot of error following as near as it can get, all passing on till they come into St. Paul's churchyard, where stand ready the 5 islands, those dumb glories that I spake of before upon the water. Upon the height of these 5 islands sit 5 persons, representing the 5 senses, visus, auditus, tactus, gustus, olfactus, or seeing, hearing, touching, tasting, smelling. At their feet, their proper emblems, Aquila, Servus, Aranaeus, Simia, Canis, an eagle, a hart, a spider, an ape, a dog.
And there we're going to pause before the next bit of action occurs. There's an awful lot of really good material in there. I do particularly like the chariot of error following as near as it can get. You know, we've got chariots, we've got people on horseback who are disguised as rhinoceroses, or however that is precisely being moved around. Envy his champion, eating of a human heart mounted on a rhinoceros. I mean, you know, there's some great visual work going on here. Have we had a rhinoceros before? I don't think we've had one yet, have we? I don't recall a rhinoceros. I like to keep a running total of the various animals that we've had. Error with garments ash-coloured, an owl, a mole, a bat, symbols of ignorance and darkness. So what's really nice about this is that as they're coming from the river and heading up to St. Paul's churchyard, there's this sort of running battle going on, and it has a nice dynamism to it, albeit with some quite long speeches. Thoughts from the room about anything that we've had? I'll go to Rachael first, and then we'll go on.
There was something in Envy's speech that made me think that that as they're passing by onlookers, that they're, you know, throwing out candy or gold or something to people as part of the celebration. I don't know if I'll be able to find it again, but it was just something that sounded like, I think they were talking about, you know, I don't know, bribes or something like that, but I can't remember the line, but it just made it sound like, you know, it was a celebration, and that there, you know, there's just somebody maybe at the sides of these performances is like, you know, handing things out to children or to the onlooking citizens.
Yes, because we have got an awful lot of people potentially around here. I mean, presumably the Whifflers are working hard to keep the streets clear. Not yet necessarily too crowded around this particular part of the route. It will get a lot more crowded, I'm sure, when we get actually onto Cheapside. We're not there yet. As I say, we're just working our way up to St. Paul's or churchyard. So, Liza.
Yeah, we do sometimes see, and Angela and Tracey can pull me up on this if I am in the darkness of error. We do sometimes see in period sources, more often for court masks than for theater. But on an occasion like this, they might run to it. We see orders for, we see mass orders with London confectioners for comfits, which are basically little sweets with a grain of spice, sometimes a grain of aniseed or something at the center, and then layers of sugar built up around that. These, I mean, they're often ordered for court masks because they're expensive things. Sugar is cheaper than it was, but it's still expensive. But given that the heading of this mask bragged about its cost and its elaborateness, perhaps they ran to a handful or two of comfits for someone to throw.
You're both right, except they wouldn't have been comfits. They were spices, because this is the grocer's company, and actually in the accounts they spend quite a lot of money on things like ginger and cinnamon and so on, which they would have thrown into the crowd. Yeah. In fact, interestingly, I don't know if you saw it, Liza, there's PhD student associated with the Box Office Bears project, has just written a piece about comfits and use of comfits in drama. So I'll send you the link to that actually. But yeah.
Oh, thank you. I do love me some Box Office Bears. Rob, you can cut this bit out if it contravenes anything.
No,
but
no, they're cool.
Before Shakespeare, we love them.
Yeah, we have very similar goals and aims. And yes, while we're on comforts, we had literally this afternoon Mercury series tossing comforts out into the audience in the Cobbler's Prophecy. So, which had moments when it seemed like it was actually referencing civic pageantry at one point. Though the use of the term pageant is, of course, often misleading. Yeah, that's a nice coincidence. That has absolutely nothing really potentially with what we're doing, but also the connections are fun. Other thoughts on the room? Eric?
I just like the description. Zeal stirred up with divine indignation at the impudence of these hellhounds. It's just like really, really sort of pitting one against the other.
Well, yeah, and you know, it's nice when an author gives you a motivation, isn't it? You know, we don't often get that with plays where you actually get right. Well, what's my part? Where am I coming from? You've got a really good set of motivations there.
But also, just the intro is like bold, furious back. You can imagine them like being whipped back, sort of.
It's extremely metal. Middleton does write a very good synopsis. Rachael, sorry, I talked over you.
No, I was just gonna say also the length of each monologue. It makes me think that it's the way that this is written like that they're written this way so that whoever they're passing by as they're saying this has to start walking to keep up with them, you know, to make a crowd that, you know, at the end of this route will be, you know, applauding the new mayor when he reaches, you know, his destination, and just, you know, kind of gather this crowd with the story that it's creating as it goes.
Well, it's an interesting stage management thing as well about, you know, making sure that the Lord Mayor and the rest of the procession are in the right place in relation to what the pageant is doing. I'm just wondering, have they got someone on hand who knows what the pageant is doing to make sure that they're in the right place and just quietly whisper in his ear, just wait here for a moment.
A director or an SM.
Yeah,
probably Munday or maybe Middleton or maybe both actually. Entirely possible, but I love that idea of people wanting to follow the story, so kind of following along.
Yeah, I mean, it's lovely. They're picking up these people. They're surrounded by. They're defending the Lord Mayor literally from these bad things, and by association, London from bad things that are surrounding them. Liza.
A quick last thought is that I absolutely love Error's speech. It is classic scenery-chewing panto villain stuff. And Envy's description would absolutely win that episode of RuPaul, like with one breast bare and nursing a snake, because that's what happens when you protect envious people. But also, no, I forgot. But also, carry on. I'll remember it later.
Okay, lovely. We will be moving further on. As I say, we've now reached Paul's Churchyard, and there's some more material heading towards us. And this is where we're getting towards the approach of a king of the Moors, his queen. So we get into questions of representation of other cultures in these pageants. But and we get various other figures appearing, as well as the established ones of truth and coming forward. So yes, so I'm going to ask if Angela, if you can read the next bit of stage direction business, and Greg, if I could ask you to be the king, and I'll throw other things into the chat as to keep us going.
No sooner can your eyes take leave of these, but they may suddenly espy a strange ship making toward, and that which may raise greater astonishment, it having neither sailor nor pilot, only upon a white silk streamer these 2 words set in letters of gold: Veritate gubernor, I am steered by truth. The persons that are contained within this little vessel are only 4: the king of the Moors, his queen, and 2 attendants of their own colour. The rest of their followers, people in the castle that stands in the middle island, of which company 2 or 3 on the top appears to sight. This king, seeming much astonished at the many eyes of such a multitude, utters his thoughts in these words.
The speech of the king of the Moors. I see amazement set upon the faces of these white people, wanderings and strange gazes. Is it at me? Does my complexion draw so many Christian eyes that never saw a king so black before? No, now I see their entire object. They were all meant to thee, grave city governor, my queen and I, well honoured with the glances that by, I must confess, many wild thoughts may rise, opinions, common murmurs, and fixed eyes, at my so strange arrival in a land where true religion and her temples stand. I being a more than in opinion's likeness, as far from sanctity as my face from whiteness, but I forgive the judgings of the unwise, whose censures ever quicken in their eyes, only begot of outward form and show, and I think meet to let such censures know, however darkness dwells upon my face, truth in my soul sets up the light of grace. And though in days of error I did run to give all adoration to the sun, the moon and stars, nay creatures base and poor, now only their creator I adore. My queen and people all at one time won by the religious conversation of English merchants, factors, travellers, whose truth did with our spirits hold commerce, as their affairs with us following their path were all brought to the true Christian faith. Such benefit in good example dwells, it oft have power to convert infidels. Nor could our desires rest till we were led on to this place where those good spirits were bred. And see how we arrived in blessed time to do that mistress service in the prime of her spotless triumphs, and to attend that honourable man, her late sworn friend. If any wonder at the safe arrival of this small vessel, which all weathers drive according to their rages, where appears nor mariner nor pilot armed against fears, know this came hither from man's guidance free, only by truth steered, as our souls must be. And see where one of her fair temples stands. Do reverence Moors, bow low, and kiss your hands. Behold our queen.
Her goodnesses are such, we cannot honour her and her house too much.
All in the ship and those in the castle bowing their bodies to the temple of St. Paul, but error, smiling betwixt scorn and anger to see such a devout humility take hold of that complexion, breaks into these, and we'll retain the same error as we did earlier, which was Angela, I believe.
What? Have my sweet-faced devils forsook me too? Nay, then my charms will have enough to do.
But time, sitting by the frame of truth, his daughter's chariot, attired agreeable to his condition, with his hourglass, wings and scythe, knowing best himself when it is fittest to speak, goes forward in this manner.
This time hath brought the effect, for on thy day nothing but truth and virtue shall display. Their virgin ensigns, infidelity, barbarism, and guile, shall in deep darkness die. Or I could never stand still thus and gaze, never turn glass again. Wish no more days that this might ever last. Pity the light of this rich glory must be cast in night. But time must go, I go, 'tis so decreed, to bless my daughter Truth and all her seed with joys immortal, triumphs never ending, and as her hand lifts me to thy ascending. Which may always be ready, worthy son, to hasten which my hours shall quickly run. Seest thou yon place, St. Paul's Cross? Thither I'll weekly bring thee, where truth's celestial harmony thou shalt hear, to which I charge thee bend a serious ear. Lead on, time's swift attendance.
Eric, could I ask you to read the next paragraph, please? So we got 5 islands about to occur, and we're moving into Cheapside. We are slowly changing location.
Then the 5 islands pass along into Cheapside, the ship next after them. The chariot of truth still before his lordship, and that of error still chased before it, where their eyes meet with another more subtle object, planting itself close by the little conduit, which may bear this character: the true form and fashion of a mount triumphant, but the beauty and glory thereof overspread with the thick sulphurous darkness, it being a fog or mist raised from error, enviously to blemish that place which bears the title London's triumphant mount. The chief grace and lustre of the whole triumph. At the 4 corners sit 4 monsters, error's disciples, on whom hangs part of the mist for their clothing, holding in their hands little thick clubs, coloured like their garments. The names of those 4 monsters: barbarism, ignorance, impudence, falsehood, who at the near approaching of truth's chariot are seen a little to tremble, whilst her deity gives life to these words.
But before we get to those words, and before we go forward, I just want to pause there and just take in some of what we've taken in. So we've changed location. We have that speech of the Moors at the previous location before we shift, and we get into, again, interesting questions of how exactly is the thick sulphurous darkness performed? Is that literally a mixture of costume and smoke, or what? So whole series of issues were sort of raised as we were in Paul's churchyard and as we headed out of it. Angela, I saw a hand.
I was going to say that I think this is like a firework. You can create that kind of smoke if you're a firework expert, so it won't go off, but it can produce a lot of smoke. And it's the government's, the king's munitions, isn't it, that actually do the fireworks and so on. So they've got no doubt they've been able to buy in some permission to get this stuff.
Yeah, so there may be literal smoke. We've also got the element of a costuming element there. On whom hangs part of the mist for their clothing, which is an interesting detail. I'm wondering if there's how that's working or not working. Any additional thoughts also about the king and queen and what's going on there? Is this the point where we actually have what I had a thought, I've lost it, so I will ignore that. Yes, any thoughts on that sequence and the issues raised there? Anyone want to leap in? Liza.
Yeah, well, we had a pair of quote-unquote Indians, from which set of Indies I'm not sure, last pageant we read, which took place 2 years ago. Now those characters last time were a king and a queen, and now we have a Moorish king and a queen, and I mean it is exoticism. It is. But then they are not portrayed as bad or evil or in error. They are portrayed as characters that are firmly on the side of truth and allied with the London merchant or the London mayor. So not as bad as it could have been, I guess.
Well, it's interesting raising this question. You know, does my complexion draw so many Christian eyes? No, it's not. It's something else entirely, which is to do with the theme of what we're talking about. So it's a really interesting way of putting that, and playing with that, and then we're playing with questions of lightness and whiteness and darkness, and where things get perhaps a little more problematic. Liza.
Error later on, in Error, of course. Error says, "Oh, have my devils forsaken me?" And we've read enough medieval mystery and morality plays to know that the devil and a cosmetic blackness of face are kind of linked together. So I guess that alludes to that old trope. But Error is wrong because he's in error.
Well, exactly. Angela.
So, well, we know now, don't we, that in fact there were quite a lot of black people in London. So they are by no means, unseen or not well known. And what's, I think, quite interesting in this speech, I mean, obviously alongside all the kind of missionary activity and all that sort of thing that it's mentioning, is that they criticise anybody that looked at them and judged them for the way they looked. So it actually, makes that point, which is kind of interesting. I mean, so I think in the context that we now understand in London, I think that meaning might be a little bit more changed than I think I would have thought of before. I don't know.
Yeah, we've had more with the earlier shows, but these are the first that speak. I think that's kind of important as well, and especially the Queen speaks as well as the King too. And of course, this is the grocers' company, so they're trading. I mean, the geography is completely skew-if, but they're trading with the Indies for things like nutmeg and so on. So there's a kind of a nod to that going on there. And I think, yeah, you're right, Angela. It's too easy to dismiss this as some sort of colonial fantasy. It's not that. That's not what's happening anywhere at this point. But it's something rather more complicated. Middleton is giving them a certain degree of agency and certainly speech. So.
Any additional thoughts as we enter into along Cheapside? So on the map, we've left the precincts of St Paul's, and I think we've reached have we reached the Little Conduit? I think it was mentioned, yes, where this smoke effect, both potentially as real smoke, but also as a more physical thing, as part of the images that are being placed. And these are the 5 islands that we were mentioned earlier that they've reused. It was there at the very, very beginning of the day. They've carted them presumably over to this side of the city, and so they're using these elements carefully to get the maximum usage out of them, I'm assuming. So yes, we've got these monsters, and they are approaching these monsters with chariots and horses and etc. Truth, of course, is still leading the way, and I think, Rachael, were you reading Truth itself earlier? Then please do continue being truthful.
What's here? The mist of error. Dare his spite stain this triumphant mount, where our delight hath been divinely fixed so many ages. Dare darkness now breathe forth her insolent rages, and hang in poisonous vapors o'er the place, from whence we received love and returned grace? I see if truth awhile but turn her eyes, thick are the mists that o'er fair cities rise. We did expect to receive welcome here, from no deformed shapes but divine and clear, and steed of monsters that this place attends, to meet with goodness and her glorious friends. Now, nor can they so forget me to be far. I know there stands no other envious bar, but that foul cloud to darken this bright day, which with this fan of stars I'll chase away. Vanish, infectious fog, that I may see this city's grace that takes her light from me. Vanish, give way.
Indeed, vanish, give way. Liza, I'm going to give you this massive chunks of prose to do. Have fun.
At this her powerful command, the cloud suddenly rises and changes into a bright spreading canopy stuck thick with stars and beams of gold, shooting forth round about it. The mount appearing then most rich in beauty and glory, the four monsters falling flat at the foot of the hill, that grave feminine shape figuring London, sitting in greatest honour. Next above her, in the most eminent place, sits Religion, the model of a fair temple on her head and a burning lamp in her hand, the proper emblems of her sanctity, watchfulness, and zeal. On her right hand sits Liberality, her head circled with a wreath of gold, in her hand a cornucopia, or horn of abundance, out of which rusheth a seeming flood of gold, but no way flowing to prodigality. For as the sea is governed by the moon, so is that wealthy river by her eye, for bounty must be led by judgment, and hence is artfully derived the only difference between prodigality and bounty. The one deals her gifts with open eyes, the other blindfold, and at her left side...
I'm just going to pause you there because there's a massive amount of text to take in. So this construction that we've reached at the little conduit, all the clouds are lifted, and we get to see the sort of tableau that we've been looking at in earlier pageants. Am I interpreting that right? With various levels of London et al. On different things, of which we are only midway through describing. But yes, am I accurate on that front? Anyone contradict me on that?
Well, we certainly seem to have a really good milliner or preparer of headdresses for this year. I do like Religion with the model of a fair temple on her head.
Yeah, so we've and we've got that grave feminine shape again, figuring London, sitting in greatest honour, with Religion, etc. So as we haven't seen London for quite a long time, I assume they've nipped around the other way, and got into place. Again, there's a certain stage management issue of people moving from different parts of to be in place for somewhere else. I'm not sure we've seen that to this degree before, though I could be wrong on that front. Sorry, Liza, on her left side sits Perfect Love. We're midway through.
So, the her is still London, yes?
I think so, yes.
On her left side sits Perfect Love, his proper seat being nearest the heart, wearing upon his head a wreath of white and red roses mingled together, the ancient witness of peace, love, and union, wherein consists the happiness of this land. His right hand holding a sphere, where in a circle of gold is contained all company's arms, and therefore called the sphere of true brotherhood, or annulus amoris, the ring of love. Upon his left hand stand two billing turtles, expressing thereby the happy condition of mutual love and society. On either side of this mount are displayed the charitable and religious works of London, especially the worthy company of grocers, in giving maintenance to scholars, soldiers, widows, orphans, and the like, where are placed one of each number, and on the two heights sit Knowledge and Modesty, Knowledge wearing a crown of stars, in her hand a perspective glass, betokening both her high judgment and deep insight, the brow of Modesty circled with a wreath all of red roses, expressing her bashfulness and blushings, and in her hand a crimson banner filled with silver stars, figuring the white purity of her shamefastness, her cheeks not red with shame or guilt, but with virgin fear and honour. At the back of this triumphant mount, Chastity, Fame, Simplicity, Meekness have their seats. Chastity wearing on her head a garland of white roses, in her hand a white silk banner filled with stars of gold, expressing the eternity of her unspotted pureness. Fame, next under her, on her head a crown of silver, and a silver trumpet in her hand, showing both her brightness and shrillness. Simplicity with a milk-white dove upon her head, and Meekness with a garland of mingled flowers. In her hand a white silk banner with a red cross, a lamb at her feet, by which both their conditions are sufficiently expressed. The mount, thus made glorious by the power of truth and the mist expelled. London thus speaks.
But we will pause briefly before London does speak. So yes, it does seem to be the same that same sort of tableau that we have encountered elsewhere. Structurally, it seems to be designed around that same sort of shape. And a whole amount of detail that you're not necessarily going to get by watching it. That this kind of text is actually rather important. There might be to have around, or for that matter, to have explained to you as it's going on. I do love that, especially the worthy company of grocers. Ding. And the question about costuming and hats, and it's definitely very interested in what's going on with the hat at the head area. But yeah, it's really detailed in those elements. Other thoughts in the room? Eric.
I feel like, the whole costuming thing, as you mentioned, is very sort of, you don't even get that in modern plays, like as in contemporary, 2020, 2021 plays, where you kind of...
Yes, because there are a lot of modern 2021 plays.
Well, like this era, anyway. You don't really, get that level of detail if you ask, if you look through, I don't know, a play script or manuscript or something, you don't really get that anymore, I think.
Well, I think it's an element that civic pageantry is as much about what the visuals are, if not more important than some of the actual spoken text. This is the kind of spectacle that people are going to be seeing, and it's important that these things look fabulous, and therefore recording that's quite important. He said.
Yeah, it's extremely unlikely that any of the children, anyone would have spotted that one of them had red cheeks, let alone what those red cheeks would have meant. So yeah.
And also,
I think what we're seeing here is Middleton without any kind of restraint. I think there's nobody saying to him, sorry, Tom, you got to cut that speech down a bit or something. He's just been given free rein to just go on. Bless him, in his incomparable syntax with no punch, for as long as he wants to, really. So you're thinking about, within the context of the same year as Chase Made in Cheapside this is, and he was working obviously with Decker on that one, and he would have been told to just kind of rein it in occasionally.
And just a brief note for any listeners at home: when we're talking about turtles, it's always turtle doves, unless there are a lot of animals in this, but it's not a shelled animal. Liza.
So I mean, things in this text might have been cut in performance, possibly for practical reasons, but the author's revenge is always to print every word that he wrote. So,
well, I was talking specifically about all this description that wouldn't be,
the description. Well, yeah. It's very beautifully written. We were talking about the possibility of the mist of error that shrouds the hill being some kind of painted cloth that is then pulled up and becomes a canopy, painted on the reverse side, perhaps. And it strikes me that perhaps the four monsters who were originally seen are maybe stagehands, because I don't think they speak. But since they're at every corner of the cloth, they could be the ones that reposition it and climb up on the structure to put it up, perhaps.
Yeah, because their first at the approach of True Chariot, they seem to tremble a little, and then isn't it they fall down or something?
Yes, they fall down flat when it's revealed, and then they later on they creep forward again.
Yeah, so the idea that they're doing a dual function of just making sure the spectacle actually works, that makes a lot of sense. Any additional thoughts before we effectively go into the last few units of action, as it were? London is about to speak. I'm going to slightly move things around a bit because London and Error vaguely talk to each other, and they've been read by the same people. So I'll say that Error. I'll ask Rachael, if you could read error, please, when it comes up. And Angela, if you can remain London still. So, yes, the mount thus made glorious by the power of truth, huzzah, and all the mist expelled, the forces of good are working on London. London speaks thus.
Thick scales of darkness in a moment's space are fell from both mine eyes. I see the face of all my friends about me now most clearly, religion's sisters, whom I honour dearly. Oh, I behold the work, it comes from thee, illustrious patroness, thou that madest me see in days of blindest ignorance. When this light was even extinguished, thou redeemedst my sight. Then to thy charge, with reverence, I commend that worthy son of mine, the virtuous friend, whom on my love and blessing I require to observe thee faithfully, and his desire to imitate thy will, and there lie bounded. For power's a dangerous sea, which must be sounded with truth and justice, or man soon runs on gainst rocks and shells to dissolution. Then that thou mayst the difference ever know twixt truth and error, a few words shall so show. The many ways that to blind error slide are in the entrance broad, hell mouth is wide. But when man enters fair, he finds it then close, dark, and straight, for hell returns no men. But the one sacred way which truth directs, only at entrance man affection checks, and is there strict alone, to which place throngs all world's afflictions, calumnies, and wrongs. But having passed those, then thou find'st a way to, in breadth, whole heaven, in length, eternal day. Then, following truth, she brings thee to that way. But first observe what works she here requires: religion, knowledge, sanctity, and chaste desires. Then charity, which bounty must express to scholars, soldiers, widows, fatherless. These have been still my works, they must be thine. Honour and action must together shine, or the best parts eclipsed. Behold but this, thy very crest shows bounty. Here 'tis put, thou givest the open hand, keep it not shut, but to the needy or deserving spirit let it spread wide, and heaven enroll it. Do these, and prove my hopeful worthy son, yet nothing spoke, but needfully must be done, and so lead forward.
At which words the whole triumph moves in his richest glory towards the cross in cheap, at which place error, full of wrath and malice, to see his mist so chased away, fall into this fury.
Heart of all the fiends in hell, could her beggarly power expel such a thick and poisonous mist, which I set envy's snakes to twist? Up monsters was her feeble frown, of force to strike my officers down. Barbarism, impudence, lies, ignorance, all your hell-bred heads advance, and once again with rotten darkness shroud this mount triumphant drop down sulphurous cloud.
At which the mists fall again, and hangs over all the beauty of the mount. Not a person of glory seen, only the four monsters gather courage again, and take their seats, advancing their clubs above their heads, which no sooner perceived, but truth in her chariot, making near to the place, willing still to rescue her friends and servants from the powers of ignorance and darkness, makes use of these words.
So just briefly pause there. Yes, so we've moved slightly further along. Triumph moves in his glory, richest glory towards the cross. So we've gone from the little conduit to the cross. We're now sort of midway along Cheapside, where a similar sort of battle occurs again. It seems to be that the aforementioned four monsters gather courage and take their seats. Am I interpreting that right? Am I wrong on that? Is that feeling appropriate in a sort of stage managey kind of way? Error Full of wrath and malice. Once missed again, once more missed. So this whole mist thing feels like there is a pyrotechnic action there. That's something you can just light the blue touch paper and then just everyone goes yay, and it happens. And there's that might be quite nice, as well as the other physical things that might be going on. Any thoughts there before we hear from Truth? Angela?
It's just that I don't know, of course, if there are pyrotechnics here, but they would be very dangerous. And I know that in some of the big celebrations with celebrations, loads of people would get hurt, especially the people putting things up. So you can just imagine all these poor people in their lovely costumes. What might happen if they've got smoke and ash and goodness knows what else descending on them. It's probably cloth.
It's probably cloth. If it were black powder, I'm sorry, Tracey. I'll quickly finish that sentence and then shut up. If it were black powder, if it's not corned too fine and you dampen it a little, it will burn very smokily, but the smoke will smell extremely sulfurous. And if you swallow any of it, it has digestive consequences.
I was just going to say, Truth's Angel earlier on has a fireworks shooting from his head, and then of course there's the amazing firework right at the very end, setting fire to Era's chariot. So Middleton makes the point of thanking Nichols, who was responsible for the pyrotechnics. So I think they would have gone for it, but I think this idea of the mist of being possibly a cloth, sort of a net of some kind, perhaps, something very sort of translucent raised is also entirely feasible. I think it's probably a combination of the two, actually.
Okay, Truth, who I think was Rachael. We're just going to read a little bit further on. Angela is London. Greg's doing the in-betweens. And Liza, Eric, could I ask you to be perfect love, please? Personification. So, Rachael, Truth, please.
Dare yet the works of ugliness appear 'gainst this day's brightness, and see us so near? How bold is sin in hell, that yet it dare rise against us? But know perdition's heir, 'tis idle to contend against our power. Vanish again, foul mist, from honor's bower.
Then the cloud dispersing itself again, and all the mount appearing glorious, it passeth so unto the standard, about which place, by elaborate action from error, it falls again, and goes so darkened, till it comes to St. Lawrence Lane end, whereby the former words, by Truth uttered, being again chased away, London thus gratefully requites her goodness.
Eternity's bright sister, by whose light error's infectious works still fly my sight, receive thy servant's thanks. Now perfect love, whose right hand holds a sphere, wherein do move 12 blessed societies, whose beloved increase styles it the ring of brightest lips. Let them all taste the golden counsel that makes health long last.
Perfect love, then standing up, holding in his right hand a sphere, and on the other 2 billing turtles, gives these words.
First then I banish from this feast of joy all excess, epicurism, both which destroy the healths of soul and body. No such guest ought to be welcome to this reverend feast, where truth is mistress, who's admitted here must come for virtue's love more than for cheer. These 2 white turtles may example give how perfect joy and brotherhood should live, and they from whom grave order is expected of rude excess must never be detected. This is the counsel which that lady calls golden advice, for by it no man falls, he that desires days healthful, sound at last. Let moderate judgment serve him at his feast. Let moderate judgment serve him at his feast. And so lead on, may perfect brotherhood shine, still in sphere and honor still in thine.
This speech so ended, his lordship and the companies pass on to Guildhall,
And there we will pause very briefly because we've reached the Guildhall. So yes, we had various stage directions again as we move along. We've we've passed on to the Standard. If you'll see on the map, that's heading towards the Guildhall, and also St Lawrence Lane, which is just a tad bit further along. So it's an ongoing game of raise the mist, lower the mist, raise the mist, lower the mist, called on at various different stages as they're going along. And yeah, this is obviously a fun game, and hopefully that's the thing, is you want the audience, the crowds crowded into Cheapside, as well as obviously the Lord Mayor and all of the procession, to sort of every time it happens to get a yay, no, or a reaction. There's something really quite fun and playful about that. And the speeches get much shorter as they're basically just cues for things to happen. Is that that might be an unfair description of these speeches? Thoughts from the room?
Well, I think cues is a fair description, because a lot of this is now, as you say, about tech, and tech needs to be cued. This seems to be an effect that requires multiple people to pull it off. So Error is cueing the descent of the mist, and London or Perfect Love, someone else is cueing the removal of the mist. Truth is cueing the removal.
Yeah, and we've got this, we've got a lot of detail, but we've also got these little sort of sops of, by elaborate action from Error, it falls again, which gives us an idea of what's happening, but it's not actually telling us how to recreate that. So there's still an awful lot of stuff there about how that actually works and how it flows.
Well, there's that's trust in your artist, isn't it? Whoever was cast as Error, it's a delicious part with some lovely text, and whoever was cast as Error, Middleton could, or Munday could probably, or Decker, in fact, could probably give them a word like elaborate action and just watch them go.
Absolutely. Other thoughts in the room before we go into what is approaching the sort of last leg now? So everyone's headed to the Guildhall for some grub. It's been a long morning, and it's been a busy day. Lots of ceremonial, lots of walking, lots of performing stuff happening around you. And there's always an interesting question when you're in the procession, how much enjoyment you can get from the actual stuff that's in theory being entertained at you. There's an awful lot of stuff happening. So a bit of refreshment, and then they're going to head back to St Paul's. So I'll ask Greg to pick up that narration and continue thusly. London and Truth will be speaking, and some more speaking will occur after that. So let's. This speech ended. They've gone to the Guildhall. Carry on, Greg.
Pass on to the Guildhall, and at their returning back, these triumphs attend to bring his lordship towards St Paul's Church, there to perform those yearly ceremonial rites which ancient and grave order have determined. Error, by the way, still busy and in action to draw darkness often upon that mount of triumph, which by truth is as often dispersed. Then all returning homewards full of beauty and brightness, this mount and the chariot of truth, both placed near to the entrance of his lordship's gate near Leadenhall, London, that the lady of that mount first gives utterance to these words.
Before the day sprang from the morning's womb, I rose. My care was earlier than the light. Nor would it rest till I now brought thee home, marrying to one joy both thy date. If our eyes count the glory, did not custom guide them, men would say 2 noons were seen together in one day. The splendor is so piercing, triumph seems as if it sparkled, and to men's esteems threw forth his thanks, wrapped up in golden flames, as if he would give light to read their names that were at cost this day to make him shine. and be as free in thanks as they in coin. But see, time checks me, and his scythe stands ready to cut it all off. No state on earth is steady. Therefore, grave son, the time that is to come, bestow on truth, and so thou art welcome home.
Time, standing up in Truth's chariot, seeming to make an offer with his scythe to cut off the glories of the day. Ouch. Growing near to the season of rest and sleep, his daughter Truth thus meekly stays his hand.
Father, desist a while till I send forth a few words to our friend, that man of worth. The power that heaven, love, and that city's choice have all conferred on thee with mutual voice, as it is great, reverend, and honorable, meet it with equal goodness, strive to excel thy former self as thy command exceeds thy last year's state, so let new acts, old deeds, and as great men in riches and in birth, heightening their blood and joining earth to earth, bestow their best hours and most serious cares, in choosing out fit matches for their heirs. So never give thou over day or hour, till with a virtue thou hast matched this power. For what is greatness if not joined with grace? Like one of high blood that hath married base, who seeks authority with an ignorant eye, is like a man seeks out his enemy. For where before his follies were not spread, or his corruptions, then they're clearly read, e'en by the eyes of all men. 'Tis so pure, a crystal of itself, it will endure no poison of oppression, bribes, hired law, but 'twill appear soon in some crack or flaw, howe'er men soothe their hopes with popular breath. If not in life, the eye'll find that crack in death. I was not made to fawn or stroke sin smooth. Be wise and hear me then that cannot soothe. I have set thee high now, be so an example. Made thee a pinnacle in honor's temple, fixing 10,000 eyes upon thy brow. There is no hiding of thy actions now. They must abide the light and imitate me, or be thrown down to fire where errors be. Nor only with these words thy ear I feed, but give those part that shall in time succeed to thee in present, and to them come, that truth may bring you all with honor home, to these gates, and to those after these. Of your own good actions keep the keys. Then as the loves of thy society hath flowed in bounties on this day, and thee, counting all cost too little for true art, doubling rewards there where they found desert, in thankfulness, justice, and virtuous care, perfect their hopes, those thy requitals are. With fatherly respect embrace them all. Faith in thy heart, and plenty in thy hall, love in thy walks, but justice in thy state, zeal in thy chamber, bounty at thy gate. And so to thee, and these a blessed night, to the fair city, peace, my grace, and light.
Trumpets sounding triumphantly. Zeal, the champion of truth on horseback, his head circled with strange fires, appears to his mistress, still circled with those strange fires, it's still the same costume, people, appears to his mistress and thus speaks.
See, yonder lady Era's chariot stands, braving the power of your incensed commands, emboldened by the privilege of night and her black faction. Yet to crown his spite, which I'll confound, I burn in divine wrath.
Strike then. I give the leave to shoot it forth.
Then here's to the destruction of that seat. There's nothing seen of thee, but fire shall eat.
At which a flame shoots from the head of Zeal, which, fastening upon that chariot of error, sets it on fire, and all the beasts that are joined to it. Risk assessment pending. The firework being made by Master Humphrey Nichols, a man excellent in his art, and the whole work and body of the triumph, with all the proper beauties of the workmanship most artfully and faithfully performed by John Grinkin, and those furnished with apparel and porters by Anthony Munday, gentleman. This proud seat of error lying now only glowing in embers, being a figure or type of his lordship's justice on all wicked offenders in the name of his government, I now conclude, holding it a more learned discretion to cease of myself than to have time cut me off rudely, and now let him strike at his pleasure. And there the text ends with the music of the song earlier, and in one printing with additional material, which I think we can safely say we're not going to get round to doing today. So this is after they've headed to Paul's church again. Along the way, and we had this when we looked at 1612. All that business on Cheapside seems to be on repeat all for the rest of the day. I don't know if it's for the whole of the day or just when they think everyone's going to be finished, they start it all up again. But it seems that this is an ongoing entertainment that is constantly playing this game of up it goes and down it goes and up it down it goes. So yeah, to keep everyone entertained who weren't here, who might not have been able to get in to the vicinity to see it when it was all properly happening, as it were.
It would have been worth hanging on to the end, wouldn't it? Just seeing Everett's chariot go off in smoke. That would have been amazing. Yeah,
because it's dark now. You know, it's well dark now. And so yes, this is well after when they're. So yes, they're this Mountain Charity of Truth, both placed near to the entrance of his lordship's gate near Leadenhall. So
they've gone quite a way, really. I mean, you know, Leadenhall's a fair trot from St Paul's.
So they've gone to St Paul's, and as they come out, they're sort of escorted home. Is that the way we can think of it?
Yeah.
And so I said earlier that, you know, the Zeal is still got the same costume, but this is the same costume but with a significant difference. So we can assume when Zeal was seen earlier, papier-mâché, you know, beautiful costuming or material or whatever to signify flame and fire. Here, head circled with strange fires followed by a pyrotechnic suggests that possibly this was a much more literal interpretation of the costume. Hope he didn't have a beard. Yeah. So yeah, and then it sets fire to this chariot, of which I really want, and all the beasts that are joined to it. I'm again not actual beasts. Unless they're having a barbecue afterwards. Wouldn't put it past them. Yes, so, you know, fun for all the family. You know, there's a lot going on here. There's a lot of moving pieces. The stage management side of this one. Last time we were here, we were looking a couple of years earlier, and the stage management questions were really about what is this text not telling us. This one, the logistics, it's giving us a lot more data about all the stuff that's happening, and it's really giving us the sense of the headache that getting all of these elements to move to the right place at the right time and coordinate with this cloud business that is happening at different stations along the route and places and different. It's an enormously complicated bit of business, this. I mean, I say the previous year's one, 1612, was quite complicated as well. That was very silly in many ways.
It was very expensive. I mean, it was about £1,300, which I just looked at the currency converter on the National Archives website, and that could buy you 150 horses and about 600 cows and a whole load of other stuff. So it's a lot of money.
So yeah, thoughts from the route. Final thoughts. Actually, we're into extra time. So of the text overall, we haven't really lingered too much on what the actual speeches are saying, and there's something slightly appropriate about that because in all the hustle and bustle of street performance, the odds on you hearing every single word is actually relatively minor, no matter how good or bad the performers are. But any thoughts on the sort of the language used and the way that this text is working, as well as the spectacle side? Before I go around the room, I'll go for volunteers. Liza's tentatively volunteering there. Muted at present.
I'm aware that I've talked a lot this evening. I'll try and keep it brief and substantial. That there are some. I mean, in general, the text for this for this pageant is, I think, quite good, and there are some lines and some passages here. I would be interested to know whether there are intertexts here with either Middleton's or Decker's other works, because there are some lines here that absolutely are good enough for the professional stage. One bit that really struck me was something. I'll quickly read it in Truth's last speech, saying, "I was not made to fawn or stroke sin smooth. Be wise and hear me then that cannot soothe. I've set thee high now, be so in example. Made thee a pinnacle in honor's temple, fixing 10,000 eyes upon thy brow. There is no hiding of thy actions now. They must abide the light and imitate me, or be thrown down to fire where errors be." Read very beautifully by Rachael, and that, it's the nature of fame and of rising through the ranks, isn't it? And it's very much the same today, that if you screw up, the stakes are proportionally higher the more famous you are. I'm guessing that the Lord Mayor of London didn't have a Twitter account, but it's that sort of thing. Perhaps London was one large Twitter account, the speed at which gossip moved. It reminded me also of the passage from the musical Hamilton, where George Washington both tells Hamilton and is told himself that history has its eyes on you.
Yeah, I was going to pick out different bits from that speech. That speech for Truth is really nice. This idea of you are being watched. No poison of oppression bribes hired law, which is just the kind of thing you really wish someone might have said to certain former politicians. It's Greg.
Certain current politicians.
Yes, well, quite a lot of them. Yes, or politicians in general. Greg, final thoughts?
Really nice. Like the description. I love the costume descriptions and set descriptions. You know what I mean? Descriptions in this one. So I just would have paid very good money to see flames coming out of somebody's head.
Sets fire to a chariot.
I reckon that 1666 nearly happened in 1613, but the sounds of things in some of this.
Yeah, if you've ever watched The Wizard of Oz, when the witch goes down when first appears to the Munchkins, and that big tower of flame comes up, and you go, my God, that's an effective trap flame scenario. Yeah, some pretty bad burning occurred there. This stuff is dangerous, and yeah, I would not be surprised in the least that bad things happened. Rachael, final thoughts?
It's interesting. I still like the idea that they're throwing spice to people, or the little confections that Liza and Tracey were talking about. It just seems like a thing that would happen during parades, that some sort of small thing would be given to people to keep their attention, or just to make it celebratory, especially because the amount of money that was spent on this, that if people were seeing this, it would excite them. But you give something out to keep naysayers from saying, well, if they're spending this much money on that, what are we getting from this, and then I don't know, just that one part with the king didn't age well. Yeah. But I like this. I like this in general. There, like Liza said, there's a couple lines in here that are like pretty amazing. One of the lines that Truth said, I can't find it. I can never find it once I pass them. But it was very beautiful, and it was very well written. So yeah, it's very enjoyable.
Yeah, I was hunting out one of my favourite lines. It's from a line of description. It's the cornucopia or horn of abundance, out of which rushes a seeming flood of gold, but no way flowing to prodigality. We spend lots of money. We have all this spectacle, but we're also trying to point out that these are not necessarily leading to excess. There is balance in this world. Eric, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I like the. I think that we talk about lines, who has the best lines and stuff, and I think Zeal does. So he gets to say stuff like "I burn in divine wrath" and stuff, which is just hilarious. I mean, in modern day context, and also just the costuming, as we've said, is just the description. You can feel like you're almost there, even though we've been reading it, we've not actually staged it. So, and I mean, the risk assessment for the flames shooting out of the head. I don't know how that would work. I'm picturing this as sort of like a chariot, as in like sort of a carnival type chariot, where you've got like the big sort of and just sort of, I don't know, does Zeal bend over like a bull or what? How does that work? I have so many questions. But yeah, this is fascinating.
Yeah, Liza.
There's probably there's quite a long time between Error's last appearance. There's some quite long speeches in the final tableau. I'm guessing that Error and the actor and their original chariot may have been pulled over, and a substitute chariot that's rigged for pyros, with maybe an effigy of Error standing in it, brought on. Angela and Tracey may know chapter and verse on this. And there may then be a fuse leading from Truth to that chariot, or, as you say, maybe there's the sort of fountain-like firework, which we know they had because they're requested in other plays as well as this pageant. Maybe a fountain type firework is in the headdress, and yeah, maybe all they have to do is bend over, but no, that wouldn't be a safe distance. So I think it probably would be a fuse, some quick match or something, going over to the chariot.
I did actually look through one of the kind of pyrotechnic sort of how-to guides that was being published in the period to see if I could see anything that obviously resembled what's happening here, but he did some very inventive work with fireworks, so it's perfectly feasible. I've got an extract here, especially for Rachael, actually, from the Grocer's Company accounts for this particular year, and it includes payment for nutmegs, ginger, almonds in the shell, and sugar loaves, which were thrown about the streets. There you go. Yeah. And that's £3.13. So, a bit of money, actually.
Mm. Yeah, so Angela, any final thoughts?
I loved reading Error. It was brilliant, and I just loved the way that it was that was sort of whole costumes and just the way that you could imagine it all was just fantastic. Actually, I really enjoyed it, even though the speeches were long. They were just so engaging. There's a real battle going on. It was brilliant.
And as far as I'm concerned, when Zeal launches the flame from their head, I'm starting to think there's a sort of additional head sort of thing on top of the head kind of thing, from which you could do things from a slightly safer distance, and sort of Lion King sort of mask set up. But I want the flame to shoot out, an error to have to, in slow motion, run away and dive as the chariot explodes. I'm sorry, that's what I'm demanding in reconstruction. And all of these pageants, we are looking at doing versions in the audio realm, and I have to say that this one is looking very nice. But also looking at ways which we can find ways of doing versions of things of this in the real world further down the line. And this one is. I don't think a health and safety would allow us to do in full, but
this one was done in the 80s. Actually, this one was done in about, I think it was 1988. Abbreviated version of it. There's a booklet about it in the Guildhall Library, which obviously I haven't got to hand, but they were very concerned about keeping the costumes intact because they're in danger of getting damaged by water or being sort of transferred around from one part of the group to the other. So. But it has been done. That's some of it.
But yeah, I want to do an animated version of this one now. That's the medium I'm looking at this going, right. Well, we've got audio, that's fine. But yeah, that's the feeling to me, the ideal at the moment. Tracey, any final thoughts from you?
I'm so pleased you liked it. Really, I really am. And I totally agree with what you've been saying about some of these speeches, and obviously there's so Middletonian. There are echoes, massive echoes of the Changeling right through, all the stuff about eyesight, repeatedly. But earlier on, particularly with Error and Envy, I was getting Horrendous Tragedy a lot as well. I was getting lots of kind of vibes of that too. And this chronologically is halfway between those two plays for Middleton as well, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, no, it is long. It's too long probably, but it's damn good.
Yeah, I think what I like about it as an event is that it has a nice narrative to it, in the sense that it's also got a narrative game going on. So you've got this conflict, you've got and they're constantly getting at each other as you move, and that turns into a game of raise the mist, lower the mist, which is a really simple thing that anyone in the audience can get. So that if you're not interested in the speeches or the other things, you've got this other dynamic going on. Same way as the previous years had a whole sort of dynamic series of games going on with was there water being shot out and cannons and things? I recall, it was a really over the top thing that we haven't really had in any of the other pageants that we've been doing. We've had a lot of pageants where people move to that sort of arrangement of people in allegorical hierarchical pyramid structure, and some speeches are made. But these two really seems to be upping the game, and whether any of the years we don't have things, or that there was more stuff of which we just don't have records. This one is a delight on that level. Unless anyone has any additional little bits and bobs to say, I'm going to close the session. Eric?
I was just going to say that because this afternoon we were also talking about Brechtian stuff and how, breaking the fourth wall and stuff. And this one actually feels like it does that because it's set in the real world. It's very grounded and very sort of, well, okay, maybe not grounded, it's the wrong word, but it's very sort of like places where people would have been. They would have known these places even if they were reading it after printing, or even if they were there.
Okay, we're hoping to continue the chronological walk through these texts. Hopefully we'll be meeting again next week with 16, 14, 15. We have got some additional material, that is associated with this text, but we may be doing something special with that further down the line. And of course, we can always arrange things in playlists so that you can follow things chronologically, even if we don't produce it chronologically. Time is an illusion. All that remains is to thank all the readers today and say goodbye.
Bye.